After her father died, Carmen Rodriguez inherited the only thing nobody wanted. An aging gas station on the edge of town. Her brother laughed. Her sister offered to buy it before the funeral flowers had even wilted. What they didn't know was that their father's greatest secret wasn't hidden in a bank account. It was hidden beneath the cracked concrete of a forgotten place they had already dismissed. Carmen Rodriguez was 38 years old. For most people in town, she was simply the woman who worked too much. The exhausted waitress who poured coffee during the breakfast rush and returned hours later for the dinner crowd. The single mother raising twin daughters on determination and very little sleep. She believed the hardest years of her life were already behind her. She was wrong. What happened next would force her to question everything she thought she knew about her father, her family, and herself. A dusty brass key sat untouched inside her purse. At the time, she had no idea why her father had left it to her. Or why he had made sure nobody else received one. Hello, my friends. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 67 years old, retired, widowed, and living in a quiet little town outside Indianapolis. And over the years, I've learned something about families. Sometimes the things people leave behind matter far more than the things they take. This is one of those stories. The afternoon sun hung low over the cemetery when the Rodriguez family gathered around the freshly covered grave. The service had been simple. Just as Roberto Rodriguez would have wanted. No expensive flowers. No grand speeches. No unnecessary attention. The old man had spent most of his life avoiding attention. At least that's what everyone believed. Carmen stood quietly beside her daughters. Mia and Luna held her hands. 12 years old. Identical faces. Completely different personalities. Mia watched everything. Luna questioned everything. Roberto used to joke that together they could solve any mystery in the world. The memory almost made Carmen smile. Almost. The pain was still too fresh. 3 days earlier, she had been serving pancakes to truck drivers at Dawson's Diner when the hospital called. She had known immediately. Some calls arrived carrying their own answers. By the time she reached the hospital, her father was already gone. The world hadn't stopped. The customers still ordered breakfast. The traffic lights still changed. The bills still arrived. But something important had disappeared from it. Age teaches strange lessons. One of them is that grief rarely arrives as one overwhelming wave. More often, it arrives through ordinary moments. An empty chair. A familiar voice that never calls. A birthday reminder you forget to delete. For Carmen, grief arrived every time she looked at her daughters. Because they had adored their grandfather. After the burial, most of the guests drifted away. Only family remained. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted the sleeve of his expensive navy suit. At 45, he had built a successful commercial development company. He spoke confidently. Dressed impeccably. And rarely entered a room without making sure people noticed. Victoria Rodriguez stood nearby. 2 years younger than Marcus. Elegant. Polished. A successful real estate investor with properties across 3 states. Growing up, Carmen had always admired them both. At least she used to. Now she wasn't so sure. Are you coming tomorrow? Victoria asked. The attorney's office. Carmen nodded. I'll be there. Marcus offered what looked like a sympathetic smile. You don't need to worry about anything. The words sounded kind. But something about them felt rehearsed. Dad's affairs are probably pretty straightforward. Hopefully, Carmen replied. Marcus glanced toward the twins. They're getting so big. Your father was always worried about their future. Carmen smiled softly. He loved those girls. He did, Victoria agreed. Then she exchanged a quick glance with Marcus. A glance so brief most people would have missed it. Carmen didn't. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it didn't. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It usually arrives one uncomfortable detail at a time. That night, Carmen returned to her small rental duplex on the south side of town. The twins were asleep within an hour. Exhaustion did that. Children grieved differently. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they asked difficult questions. Sometimes they simply fell asleep in the middle of a sentence. Carmen sat alone at the kitchen table. The house felt unusually quiet. A stack of unpaid bills sat beside her purse. Electricity. Medical expenses. Car insurance. The familiar collection of worries. She rubbed her eyes. Her body ached. She had worked nearly 70 hours the previous week. The diner barely paid enough. But it was honest work. And honest work had always mattered to her father. Her gaze drifted toward the brass key. It lay on the table beneath the kitchen light. Small. Worn. Heavy for its size. The attorney had handed it to her after the funeral. No explanation. Just a sealed envelope with her father's handwriting. She picked it up again, running her thumb across the tarnished metal. Then she opened the envelope for what felt like the 100th time. Inside was a single handwritten note. For Carmen. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let anyone rush you. Don't sell anything until you understand what you're looking at. Trust yourself. More than you think you should. Love. Dad. That was all. No explanation. No instructions. No clue. Just 6 short lines. Carmen stared at the paper. A lump formed in her throat. Her father had never been a man of many words. But he had always chosen them carefully. She folded the note and placed it back inside the envelope. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Written faintly in the lower corner. Almost invisible. A small symbol. A 5-pointed star. The same symbol that appeared on the faded sign hanging outside Estrella gas station. Her father's gas station. The one she had barely visited in years. The one nobody talked about anymore. A chill ran through her. Not fear. Something else. Curiosity. Questions. The beginning of something she couldn't yet name. Upstairs, Luna called out in her sleep. Carmen smiled sadly. Then she switched off the kitchen light and headed toward the stairs. She had no way of knowing that less than 24 hours later, her brother and sister would try to convince her to give away the most important inheritance her father had ever left behind. And she certainly had no idea that hidden beneath that forgotten gas station was a truth powerful enough to destroy everything her family believed about Roberto Rodriguez. Including the lies they had spent years telling themselves. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Carmen barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's handwriting. Don't let anyone rush you. Trust yourself. Simple words. Yet they lingered in her mind long after dawn. By 8 o'clock, she was already awake in the kitchen packing lunches for Mia and Luna. The twins sat across from her eating cereal. Neither one spoke much. The previous week had changed all of them. Children often understand more than adults realize. They simply don't always have the words to explain it. You okay, Mom? Mia finally asked. Carmen forced a smile. I will be. Luna looked up. Grandpa wanted you to have that key. Carmen blinked. What makes you say that? Because he gave it to you. The answer sounded simple. Almost childish. Yet something about it felt important. Roberto had never done anything by accident. Not once. After dropping the girls off at school, Carmen drove downtown toward the attorney's office. The building stood in one of the older parts of town. Red brick. Tall windows. The kind of place that looked exactly the same today as it had 30 years ago. Marcus and Victoria were already waiting when she arrived. Marcus checked his watch. Victoria sipped coffee from an expensive travel mug. Both smiled when they saw her. At least they tried to. Carmen, Victoria said warmly. How are the girls? They miss Grandpa. Victoria nodded sympathetically. We all do. The word sounded right. The expression almost matched. Almost. Age teaches strange lessons. One of them is learning to notice when concern feels genuine. And when it feels practiced. The three siblings entered the conference room together. Attorney Harold Benson greeted them politely. He had known Roberto for nearly 20 years. His face looked unusually serious. That struck Carmen immediately. Most wills are straightforward. This one apparently wasn't. Once everyone sat down, Harold opened a thick folder. He adjusted his glasses. Then he looked directly at the three siblings. Your father left very specific instructions. Marcus leaned back confidently. Victoria folded her hands. Carmen remained silent. Harold began reading. Several charitable donations came first. A local church. A veterans organization. A scholarship fund. None of that surprised anyone. That sounded exactly like Roberto. Then came the personal inheritances. Marcus received $50,000. Victoria received $50,000. Neither reacted visibly. Though Carmen noticed Marcus's jaw tighten slightly. Perhaps he had expected more. Perhaps both of them had. Then Harold paused. The room suddenly felt quieter. To my daughter, Carmen Rodriguez. He stopped and turned a page. I leave full ownership of Estrella gas station, including all buildings, inventory, equipment, land rights, and associated assets. Silence. Complete silence. Marcus stared. Victoria blinked. Carmen wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Estrella gas station. The old station outside town. The place her father spent most of his life. The place everyone assumed was barely surviving. Harold continued. The property is to remain solely under Carmen Rodriguez's control. It may not be sold, transferred, or divided without her written authorization. Marcus laughed first. A short laugh. Almost involuntary. That's it? Victoria glanced at him. Marcus. What? He replied. I'm just surprised. Harold continued reading, ignoring the interruption. But Carmen barely heard the rest. Her thoughts were racing. Why Estrella? Why her? Why not divide everything equally? Questions piled on top of questions. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Outside the office, Marcus immediately put an arm around Carmen's shoulder. The gesture looked affectionate. Brotherly. Anyone watching would have thought he was comforting her. Carmen, he said gently. You know Dad loved that station. She nodded. Of course. Marcus sighed. The problem is that place is falling apart. Victoria joined them. We've been worried about you. There it was. Not pressure. Not yet. Concern. Carefully packaged concern. You already work 2 jobs, Victoria said. You have 2 girls to raise. Marcus nodded. The property taxes alone could become a nightmare. Carmen listened quietly. Neither of them had actually asked what she wanted. They were already explaining why keeping the station was a mistake. Maybe they truly believed they were helping. Maybe they thought they knew what was best. But somewhere along the way, they stopped asking what Carmen wanted. I haven't even seen the place in months, Carmen admitted. Marcus seized on the opening. Exactly. You don't need another burden. Victoria smiled. We could help you. The word help hung in the air. Marcus pulled out his phone. I could probably find a buyer immediately. Carmen looked at him. You already looked? The question caught him off guard. Only for a second. Just thinking ahead. Victoria quickly stepped in. We're family. We don't want anyone taking advantage of you. The conversation sounded reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. Because manipulation rarely arrives wearing a villain's face. Most of the time it arrives dressed as concern. An hour later, Carmen sat alone in her car staring at the paperwork. The station's value wasn't impressive. The structures were old. The fuel contracts outdated. The property generated very little income. At least on paper. Yet something felt wrong. Her father had never been careless. And he certainly wasn't sentimental enough to leave her a failing business simply because of memories. Roberto always had a reason. Always. As she flipped through the documents, a folded piece of paper slipped from the file. She froze. The paper wasn't listed in the inventory. It looked older than everything else. Yellowed with age. Carefully hidden between 2 pages. Slowly, Carmen unfolded it. At first glance it appeared to be a maintenance schedule. Numbers. Dates. Fuel delivery records. Nothing unusual. Then she noticed something. Several dates had been circled. Not random dates. The same date appeared again and again. August 17th. August 17th. August 17th. Year after year. Her heartbeat quickened. August 17th. The birthday of Mia and Luna. The same number combination her father had once used on every lock he didn't want anyone else opening. Carmen immediately thought about the brass key waiting inside her purse. For the first time, she felt certain of something. Her father hadn't left her a burden. He had left her a puzzle. And somewhere inside Estrella gas station, the first piece was waiting. The next morning, Carmen finished her breakfast shift at Dawson's Diner and drove straight toward Estrella gas station. The folded paper from her father's file sat on the passenger seat beside her. She had looked at it at least 20 times since leaving the attorney's office. The circled dates bothered her. Especially August 17th. The birthday of Mia and Luna. The same number combination her father had used for years. Roberto never repeated himself without a reason. That much Carmen knew. The station appeared long before she reached it. The faded sign stood crooked beside the road. The blue paint had peeled away years ago. Several letters in the word Estrella were barely visible. A few weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. The gas pumps looked older than some of the customers she served at the diner. At first glance, Marcus seemed right. The place looked like a burden. A very expensive burden. Carmen parked near the service bay and stepped out. The wind carried the smell of dust and old gasoline. For a moment she simply stood there. Looking. Remembering. When she was a little girl, this place had felt enormous. Every Saturday morning, Roberto brought her here. Not Marcus. Not Victoria. Her. Back then she never understood why. She thought he simply needed help stocking shelves. Now she wasn't so sure. The front door creaked as she stepped inside. Nothing had changed. The same old counter. The same shelves. The same faded advertisements hanging near the windows. Even the ancient coffee machine still sat in the corner. Unplugged. Covered in dust. Some places don't just hold memories. They preserve them. The station felt exactly like that. Carmen slowly walked toward the office. A framed photograph hung on the wall. Roberto standing beside the station in 1987. Much younger. Much stronger. Much harder to understand. She smiled sadly. Then she unlocked the office door. The room was small. A metal desk. Several filing cabinets. Boxes stacked against the wall. Nothing unusual. At least not immediately. She opened the first cabinet. Old tax documents. Insurance records. Maintenance reports. Boring. Expected. The second cabinet contained similar paperwork. Nothing important. The third was locked. Carmen frowned. The brass key. Without thinking, she reached into her purse. The key fit perfectly. A soft click echoed through the room. Then the drawer slid open. Inside sat a single wooden box. Nothing else. No papers. No files. Just the box. Her pulse quickened. Carefully she lifted it onto the desk. The wood was dark with age. A small brass plate covered the lid. On it were engraved 3 numbers. 8. 17. 2012. August 17, 2012. The day Mia and Luna were born. Carmen froze. Why would her father place their birthday here? Why not hers? Why not his own? Questions kept multiplying. The truth rarely arrives all at once. Sometimes it arrives one small clue at a time. Slowly she opened the lid. Inside she found an envelope. And a photograph. The photograph caught her attention immediately. It showed Roberto holding newborn twins at the hospital. Mia and Luna. His smile looked different. Almost emotional. On the back he had written, "The day I finally understood what matters." Carmen stared at the words for several seconds. Her father had never spoken much about feelings. Yet here they were. Written in his own hand. A lump formed in her throat. Then she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. Again. No explanation. Just a message. If you found this, you're looking in the right place. But not deep enough. Trust your memory. The answer is somewhere you've already seen. Dad. Carmen sighed. Typical Roberto. Even after death he was speaking in riddles. She looked around the office again. Somewhere you've already seen. What did that even mean? For nearly an hour she searched. Shelves. Boxes. Drawers. Nothing. Eventually frustration began replacing curiosity. She sat behind the old desk. Exhausted. The same feeling she experienced after a double shift. The same feeling she carried through most of her adult life. Being tired can be dangerous. Not because it makes people weak. Because it makes them willing to quit. For a brief moment, Carmen understood why Marcus wanted her to sell the station. Walking away would be easier. Much easier. Then her eyes landed on the old coffee machine. The dusty one in the corner. Something about it felt familiar. Not the machine itself. The memory attached to it. Suddenly she saw herself at 8 years old. Sitting on a stool behind the counter. Drawing pictures while Roberto worked. One afternoon she had asked why he always kept a broken coffee machine. Most people would have thrown it away. Roberto had smiled. Then he said something she never forgot. The things people ignore are usually the things worth looking at. Carmen slowly stood. Her heart began beating faster. The coffee machine. Everyone ignored it. Including her. She crossed the room. The machine looked completely useless. Dust covered every surface. The power cord was missing. But when she touched it, she noticed something strange. The machine was bolted to the floor. Why would anyone bolt down a broken coffee machine? A chill ran through her. Not fear. Recognition. She grabbed a wrench from the maintenance shelf. 10 minutes later the final bolt came loose. The machine shifted slightly. Beneath it was a small steel panel hidden in the concrete. Carmen stepped back. For several seconds she simply stared. Her father had hidden something here. For years. Maybe decades. And nobody had noticed. Not customers. Not employees. Not Marcus. Not Victoria. Nobody. Because nobody had bothered looking. The steel panel contained a small lock. Old. Heavy. Familiar. Very familiar. With trembling fingers, Carmen removed the brass key from her purse once more. The same key. The same one her father left behind. Slowly she inserted it into the lock. The mechanism turned. A deep metallic sound echoed beneath the floor. Then something moved below her feet. Carmen's breath caught. The concrete trembled softly. And somewhere underneath Estrella gas station, a hidden door began to open. The hidden door opened slowly. A rush of cool air rose from below. Carmen instinctively stepped back. For a moment, neither fear nor excitement moved her. Only disbelief. The opening revealed a narrow metal staircase descending into darkness. She stared at it. Then looked around the empty station. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody knew what she had found. The thought made her uneasy. Not because she was afraid of what might be below. Because she suddenly realized her father had spent years protecting something important enough to hide. And important things often attract dangerous people. The truth has a strange way of changing shape. A mystery is exciting when it's still a question. It becomes something else entirely when it starts becoming real. Carmen reached into her purse and grabbed her phone. The flashlight illuminated the first few steps. Old steel. Dusty but solid. Not abandoned. Maintained. That surprised her. Someone had taken care of this place. Maybe her father. Maybe someone else. Slowly she descended. The staircase extended nearly 20 feet underground. At the bottom stood a reinforced steel door. Much newer than anything upstairs. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The station above looked forgotten. This door did not. Beside the handle sat a keypad. Carmen immediately thought of the repeated date. August 17th. She entered the numbers. 817. Nothing happened. Wrong code. She frowned. Then she remembered something. Her father always wrote dates differently. Month first. Then day. Then year. A habit he never abandoned. Carefully she entered. 8172012. A green light appeared. A soft click echoed through the hallway. The door unlocked. Carmen stood frozen. Then slowly pushed it open. The room beyond wasn't what she expected. No piles of cash. No gold bars. No secret government headquarters. Just a large underground archive. Shelves lined every wall. Thousands of folders. Boxes. Ledgers. Maps. Photographs. Records. Rows and rows of carefully organized records. The air smelled like paper and time. Everything appeared untouched. Preserved. Protected. The room felt less like a treasure vault. And more like a memory vault. Suddenly Carmen understood something. Her father hadn't hidden money. He had hidden history. She walked deeper into the room. Each shelf contained labels. Years. Locations. Names. Businesses. Properties. Partnerships. Decades of information. One section immediately caught her attention. Rodriguez family. Her heart skipped. There were 3 boxes. Marcus. Victoria. Carmen. She stared at them. Every instinct told her to open them. Every instinct also told her not to. For several seconds she simply stood there. Then she reached for her own box. Inside were photographs. School report cards. Letters she had written as a child. Drawings. Birthday cards. Even a Mother's Day project she made in 3rd grade. Carmen laughed softly through unexpected tears. Her father had saved everything. Absolutely everything. People often think older parents care most about success. Sometimes they care more about moments. The small things. The things nobody else remembers. Near the bottom sat a sealed envelope. Her name was written across the front. In Roberto's handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. Longer than the previous notes. Much longer. My dear Carmen. If you've reached this room, then you've done exactly what I hoped you would do. You looked deeper. Most people stop when things become difficult. You never did. Not even as a child. I know your brother and sister may not understand my decisions. Perhaps one day they will. Perhaps they won't. But there are things you deserve to know. The station was never just a station. For 40 years it served as the center of everything I built. Not because it was valuable. Because it was overlooked. People rarely pay attention to places they consider ordinary. That has always been their greatest weakness. Carmen sat down slowly. Continuing to read. Over the next several pages, Roberto explained how he had spent decades quietly acquiring small investments. Warehouses. Truck routes. Storage facilities. Commercial properties. Nothing flashy. Nothing that attracted attention. Small pieces accumulated over a lifetime. Most remained connected through businesses managed from Estrella. According to the letter, the station itself generated very little money. But the network around it had become something much larger. Something worth protecting. Something worth documenting. Then Carmen reached a paragraph that made her stop breathing. If anything happens to me, someone may eventually try to acquire Estrella. Do not rush. Do not sell. And most importantly, do not trust anyone who suddenly becomes interested in helping. Especially family members who ignored the station while I was alive. Carmen lowered the letter. Her stomach tightened. Marcus. Victoria. The conversation outside the attorney's office replayed in her head. The offers. The concern. The pressure disguised as kindness. A cold feeling settled over her. Maybe they didn't know everything. But they clearly knew something. Enough to want the property. Enough to move quickly. Enough to make her nervous. The phone in her pocket suddenly vibrated. The sound nearly made her jump. Marcus. Calling. She stared at the screen. Then let it ring. A second later another call arrived. Victoria. She ignored that one too. Then a text message appeared. From Marcus. Just checking on you. Have you thought any more about the station? A second message followed almost immediately. I may have found someone willing to buy it. Very good offer. Call me. Carmen looked at the words. Then looked around the underground archive. Nobody finds buyers that quickly. Not for a dying gas station. Not unless they were already looking. The realization hit her slowly. And then all at once. Marcus hadn't started searching after the will was read. He had been preparing before that. Maybe weeks before. Maybe months. And if that was true, one question became impossible to ignore. How much had her brother already known before their father died? As Carmen sat alone in the underground room, surrounded by decades of secrets, she realized she wasn't simply uncovering her father's past anymore. She was beginning to uncover her family's. Carmen didn't leave the underground archive until nearly sunset. The deeper she searched, the more questions appeared. Every answer seemed connected to 3 new mysteries. By the time she climbed back up the hidden staircase, her head felt heavy. Not from fear. From information. The station looked different now. The same cracked floor. The same dusty shelves. The same faded signs. Yet somehow everything had changed. Once you discover a secret, you can never return to the version of the world that existed before it. Carmen locked the office carefully. Then she drove to pick up Mia and Luna from school. The girls were waiting outside the building. Luna climbed into the back seat first. Mia followed. "You're late," Luna announced. 5 minutes. Carmen smiled. "Thank you for keeping track." "I always do." That was true. Luna noticed everything. Mia noticed people. Luna noticed details. The twins balanced each other. Roberto used to say they reminded him of two different sides of a compass. One found direction. The other found purpose. The memory stayed with Carmen during the drive home. That evening felt normal. Dinner. Homework. Laundry. The ordinary rhythm of life. And yet Carmen carried a secret beneath it all. A hidden room. Boxes of records. A letter from her father. And a growing suspicion about her brother and sister. The next morning, her phone rang before sunrise. Marcus. Again. Carmen stared at the screen. Then answered. "Morning. Carmen." His voice sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. "I was hoping we could have lunch." "Why?" A brief pause followed. "Do I need a reason to have lunch with my sister?" "No." Another pause. Then Marcus laughed softly. "Fair enough." He lowered his voice. "I've been thinking about the station." "Of course you have," Carmen thought. Out loud she said nothing. Marcus continued. "Look, I know Dad left it to you. I understand that. But you need to be realistic." There it was again. Realistic. A word people often use when trying to convince someone to abandon hope. Or curiosity. Or instinct. "I'm listening," Carmen said. "I spoke with someone yesterday." Marcus sounded confident now. "The property's worth more than I expected." "Really?" 300,000. Carmen nearly dropped the phone. $300,000. For a station everybody claimed was worthless. Interesting. Very interesting. She remained silent. Marcus kept talking. "With that money, you could pay off debt. Set up college funds. Reduce your hours. Spend more time with the girls." Everything he said sounded reasonable. Everything he said touched exactly the places where Carmen felt vulnerable. Because manipulation works best when it contains pieces of truth. For years Carmen had worried about money. For years she had worked double shifts. For years she had felt guilty every time she missed a school event. Marcus knew that. He always had. "Think about it," he said. "I only want what's best for you." After hanging up, Carmen sat quietly at the kitchen table. The coffee in front of her had already gone cold. She didn't notice. $300,000. Nobody offers that kind of money for a dying gas station. Not unless they're expecting something more valuable in return. The thought followed her throughout the day. And later that afternoon, she returned to the underground archive. This time she focused on the business records. Hours passed. Folders piled up. Numbers. Contracts. Property agreements. Old correspondence. Most of it seemed ordinary. Until she found a ledger dated 14 years earlier. Roberto's handwriting filled every page. Careful. Precise. Organized. Near the middle of the book, several names appeared repeatedly. One of them stopped her cold. Marcus Rodriguez. Carmen blinked. Then read the page again. And again. The ledger showed loans. Large loans. Private loans. Over a period of nearly 10 years. Some had been repaid. Others had not. Attached notes explained why. Business losses. Investment failures. Emergency financing. The date stretched back much further than Carmen expected. Her father hadn't simply helped Marcus once. He had rescued him repeatedly. Yet Marcus always presented himself as self-made. Successful. Independent. The discovery unsettled her. Not because Marcus borrowed money. Many people do. Because he never mentioned it. Not once. As she continued reading, another file slipped loose from the shelf. This one belonged to Victoria. The pattern looked familiar. Financial support. Business bailouts. Personal guarantees. Roberto had quietly protected both of them for years. A deep sadness settled over Carmen. She remembered family dinners. Arguments. Boasting. Competition. She remembered how hard Marcus and Victoria always worked to impress their father. Nothing was ever enough. Not the promotions. Not the awards. Not the expensive homes. Looking back now, Carmen wondered if they had spent their entire lives chasing something impossible. Approval. Family conflicts rarely begin with greed. More often, they begin with hurt. Unspoken hurt. The kind that sits quietly for years. Then grows. Then changes shape. As the afternoon faded, Carmen discovered another envelope. This one wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to all three children. The seal had never been broken. Carefully she opened it. Inside sat a single handwritten page. The words immediately felt heavier than everything she had read so far. My children. If you are reading this together, then perhaps there is still hope. Success is a strange thing. Many people spend their lives chasing it. Only to discover they were really chasing approval. I know I made mistakes. More than you realize. Especially as a father. I pushed too hard. Expected too much. And sometimes forgot to say what mattered most. I was proud of all three of you. Not for what you achieved. For who you were becoming. The letter stopped there. At least on that page. The remaining pages were missing. Torn away. Gone. Carmen stared at the incomplete message. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Why would someone remove the rest? Who removed it? And more importantly, what did Roberto write next? As she carefully placed the letter back inside the envelope, a sound echoed faintly from somewhere above. A door closing. Carmen froze. The station was supposed to be empty. Slowly she looked toward the staircase leading back to the surface. Then she heard it again. Footsteps. Someone was inside Estrella gas station. Carmen didn't move. The footsteps above her head stopped. For several long seconds, the underground archive became completely silent. She could hear her own breathing. Nothing else. The envelope remained in her hands. The unfinished letter from her father suddenly felt far less important than whoever might be upstairs. Slowly, she placed the papers back into the box. Then she switched off her phone flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room. People reveal themselves in strange ways. Sometimes through what they say. Sometimes through what they do. And sometimes through what they do when they believe nobody is watching. Carmen waited. Another sound drifted down the staircase. A drawer opening. Then closing. Metal scraping against metal. Someone was searching. Not wandering. Not exploring. Searching. The distinction mattered. Very much. After nearly 2 minutes, Carmen carefully climbed the stairs. Each step felt louder than the last. At the top, she stopped beside the hidden doorway. Listening. The office was only a few feet away. She heard papers moving. Cabinets opening. Then a frustrated sigh. A familiar sigh. Her stomach tightened. Because she recognized it. Marcus. Carmen remained perfectly still. She could hardly believe it. Not because Marcus was there. Because he had arrived so quickly. The will had only been read the day before. Yet somehow he already seemed desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Eventually footsteps crossed the office floor. Then came another sound. A phone call. Marcus speaking quietly. I checked the cabinets. A pause. No. Another pause. I know. His voice sounded irritated. No, she hasn't sold yet. Carmen's heart pounded. Sold yet. Not if she sold. When she sold. As though the decision had already been made. Marcus continued. I'm telling you, something is here. Silence followed. Then. Dad wouldn't have protected that place for 40 years otherwise. Carmen froze. 40 years. Marcus knew far more than he had admitted. Far more. A few moments later, the office door opened. Footsteps crossed the station. Then a vehicle started outside. Finally, silence returned. Real silence. Carmen remained hidden for another 5 minutes. Only when she was absolutely certain he had left did she emerge. The station looked exactly as it had before. At least at first glance. Then she noticed one of the filing cabinets slightly open. Marcus had been searching. But for what? And who had he been talking to? Those questions followed her all the way home. That evening she barely touched dinner. Mia noticed immediately. You found something. Carmen looked up. What makes you say that? You get quiet when you're thinking. Luna nodded. Really quiet. The twins exchanged knowing smiles. Children often notice changes long before adults realize they're visible. Carmen laughed softly. Maybe Roberto had been right about them. Maybe they saw more than people assumed. After the girls went upstairs, Carmen sat alone at the kitchen table. The unfinished letter lay beside her. She kept returning to the same question. Why were the final pages missing? The answer seemed obvious. Someone had removed them. But who? Marcus? Victoria? Her father himself? She couldn't know. Not yet. The truth rarely arrives as a complete picture. More often it arrives like pieces of a puzzle scattered across a table. You don't solve it by staring at the missing pieces. You solve it by understanding the pieces you already have. The following afternoon, Carmen returned to the archive. This time she focused entirely on Roberto's personal records. Hours passed. Most of the material consisted of journals. Business notes. Property evaluations. Meeting records. Nothing dramatic. Nothing shocking. Until she discovered a locked metal case hidden behind several storage boxes. Unlike everything else in the archive, this container looked relatively new. Almost recent. The brass key didn't fit. Neither did any of the spare keys hanging nearby. Carmen examined the box carefully. Then something caught her eye. A small indentation near the latch. A star. The same symbol from Estrella's sign. The same symbol Roberto had drawn on the note after his death. She stared at it. Thinking. Remembering. Trust your memory. The answer is somewhere you've already seen. His words echoed in her mind. Somewhere you've already seen. Not somewhere you've never seen. Somewhere you've already seen. Suddenly she remembered the photograph. The one from the wooden box. The picture of Roberto holding newborn Mia and Luna. She pulled it from her bag. Turned it over. And looked again. The day I finally understood what matters. Below the sentence sat another marking she hadn't noticed before. A tiny star. And beside it. M+L. At first she thought it referred to the twins. Mia and Luna. Then another possibility occurred to her. The initials weren't beside the message. They were beside the star. Almost like instructions. Almost like a code. Carmen grabbed a notebook. M. L. Mia. Luna. The twins. Their names. Their birthdays. The archive. The hidden door. Everything kept circling back to them. Why? Then the answer appeared. Simple. Almost embarrassingly simple. Her father had always called the girls his North Stars. Not because they were perfect. Because they helped people find direction. Stars. The symbol. The clue. The memory. For a moment she simply smiled. Roberto was still teaching lessons. Even now. Carefully she entered the twins' full names into the electronic lock attached to the case. Mia Luna. Nothing. Wrong. She tried again. Luna Mia. Nothing. She sighed. Then laughed at herself. Her father never used shortcuts. Never. Slowly she typed. Myeluna 08172012. The lock clicked. Immediately. Carmen's breath caught. The case opened. Inside sat a thick folder. Several flash drives. And one sealed envelope. Written across the front in bold handwriting were 6 words. Open only when you are ready. For the first time since entering the archive, Carmen felt genuine fear. Because she suddenly realized something. Everything she had discovered so far. Her father had expected her to find. This folder was different. This was something he had wanted hidden. Even from her. Until the right moment. And somehow Carmen knew that once she opened that envelope, there would be no turning back. Carmen stared at the envelope for a long time. Open only when you are ready. 6 simple words. Yet they carried more weight than anything she had discovered so far. The underground archive suddenly felt smaller. Quieter. As though the room itself was waiting. Waiting to see what she would do next. She looked at her father's handwriting. The same careful lettering she had seen on birthday cards. School notes. Christmas gifts. For a moment, she almost put the envelope back. Almost. But Roberto knew her too well. If he truly wanted something hidden forever, he would never have left it where she could find it. Slowly, Carmen broke the seal. Inside was a letter. And a photograph. The photograph came first. 3 children standing beside Estrella gas station. Marcus. Victoria. And Carmen. The picture looked nearly 30 years old. Marcus was smiling. Victoria had her arm around Carmen's shoulders. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked close. Carmen stared at it longer than she expected. Because she honestly couldn't remember the last time the 3 of them had looked like that. Families rarely fall apart overnight. Most of the time, they drift apart quietly. One disappointment at a time. One misunderstanding at a time. One unspoken hurt at a time. Eventually, strangers know more about each other than siblings do. Carmen turned the photograph over. A date was written on the back. June 14, 1995. Beneath it, Roberto had added a note. The last summer before everything changed. A chill ran through her. She immediately unfolded the letter. My dear Carmen. If you're reading this, you've already discovered more than I ever expected. The next thing I'm about to tell you will be difficult. Not because it involves money. Not because it involves business. Because it involves family. And family is always harder. Carmen continued reading. Years ago, I believed success would bring our family together. I was wrong. The more successful Marcus and Victoria became, the harder they worked to earn something I didn't know how to give. My approval. I spent years believing I was teaching them discipline. Sometimes I wonder if I was teaching them something far worse. The words hit Carmen harder than she expected. Because they sounded honest. Painfully honest. Not like a businessman. Not like a father defending himself. Like an old man finally admitting his mistakes. The letter continued. Your brother and sister were not bad children. Far from it. Marcus always wanted to prove he could build something important. Victoria wanted to prove she could stand on her own. Neither goal was wrong. But somewhere along the way, success became more important than character. And I failed to stop it. Carmen lowered the page. The archive felt silent again. She remembered family dinners from years ago. Marcus discussing investments. Victoria discussing property deals. Their father listening quietly. Sometimes approving. Sometimes not. At the time, Carmen thought they were simply arguing about business. Now she wasn't so sure. The letter continued. Several years ago, I discovered financial activities connected to businesses owned by both Marcus and Victoria. At first, I hoped there had been a misunderstanding. Then I hoped there had been a mistake. Eventually, I learned neither was true. Carmen's stomach tightened. She kept reading. I spent years helping them solve problems. Paying debts. Protecting reputations. Fixing mistakes. Each time I believed it would be the last. Each time I was wrong. The words felt heavier now. Not because Roberto sounded angry. Because he sounded tired. Very tired. Age teaches strange lessons. One of them is understanding that disappointment often hurts more than anger. Especially when it comes from people we love. Halfway through the letter, Carmen reached a section that changed everything. If Marcus or Victoria ever become unusually interested in Estrella, pay attention. It means they have learned part of the truth. But not all of it. Neither of them knows what the station truly controls. Neither of them knows its full value. Yet they know enough to come looking. Carmen's pulse quickened. Marcus already had. She had seen that herself. The phone calls. The pressure. The searching. The secret conversation inside the office. Everything suddenly made sense. At least partially. Then she reached the final page. And for the first time, Roberto mentioned something specific. Inside the folder are records connected to 6 properties. Most people believe those properties belong to separate companies. They do not. They are connected. Together, they represent the foundation of everything I built. If managed properly, they will provide security for generations. For you. For Mia. For Luna. Not because they deserve money. Because they deserve choices. The sentence lingered in Carmen's mind. They deserve choices. Not wealth. Not luxury. Choices. That sounded exactly like Roberto. Near the bottom of the page, one final paragraph appeared. Perhaps one day your brother and sister will understand what truly matters. I hope so. Because despite everything, they are still my children. And I never stopped loving them. Carmen closed her eyes. The words hurt more than any accusation could have. Because Roberto wasn't seeking revenge. Even after everything. Even after the disappointment. Even after years of mistakes. He was still hoping. Still believing. Still loving. That was the tragedy. Not the money. Not the businesses. The family. The family that never became what he dreamed it could be. A sudden vibration interrupted her thoughts. Her phone. Unknown number. Carmen almost ignored it. Then answered. Hello? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then an elderly woman's voice appeared. Quiet. Careful. Unfamiliar. Is this Carmen Rodriguez? Yes. Another pause. I wasn't sure I'd ever make this call. Carmen sat upright. Who is this? My name is Evelyn Hart. The name meant nothing. At least initially. Then the woman spoke again. I worked with your father for nearly 20 years. Carmen froze. The archives suddenly felt colder. I think it's time someone told you what Roberto was protecting. Silence filled the room. Then Evelyn added one final sentence. And those words made Carmen's heart stop. Because your brother isn't the only person searching for it anymore. For several seconds, Carmen couldn't speak. She sat alone in the underground archive holding her phone. The voice on the other end remained calm. Patient. As though she understood exactly what Carmen was feeling. How did you get this number? Carmen finally asked. Your father gave it to me. Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. Years ago. Carmen frowned. My father passed away last week. I know. The woman's voice softened. I attended the funeral. That surprised Carmen. She remembered nearly everyone who had been there. Family. Neighbors. Church friends. Former co-workers. She didn't remember an Evelyn Hart. Almost as if reading her thoughts, Evelyn continued. You wouldn't recognize me. Your father preferred it that way. The answer raised even more questions. Carmen glanced around the underground archive. Every discovery seemed to open 3 new mysteries. Not 1. 3. Who exactly are you? She asked. A long silence followed. Then Evelyn answered carefully. Someone your father trusted. I helped manage several of the properties connected to Estrella. Carmen's heart skipped. The properties. The same properties mentioned in Roberto's letter. Suddenly this conversation mattered. Very much. Evelyn continued. Your father spent years building something. Not an empire. Not a fortune. Something more practical. The older woman paused. Security. That word caught Carmen's attention. Security. Not wealth. Not power. Security. It sounded exactly like Roberto. The man who fixed things instead of replacing them. The man who drove the same pickup truck for 20 years. The man who never cared about appearances. I think we should meet, Evelyn said. When? Tomorrow. Where? Estrella. Carmen hesitated. Then agreed. After ending the call, she remained seated for a long time. Thinking. The underground room felt different now. Less like a collection of secrets. More like the center of a much larger story. One she still didn't understand. The next afternoon arrived slowly. Carmen spent the morning serving coffee and pancakes at Dawson's diner. The routine helped. Normal life has a way of keeping people grounded. Especially when everything else feels uncertain. At 2 o'clock, she arrived at Estrella. An old silver sedan was already parked outside. A woman stood near the pumps. She looked to be in her 70s. Gray hair. Simple clothes. Comfortable shoes. Nothing about her seemed remarkable. Yet something about her posture suggested confidence. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need attention. Evelyn smiled when Carmen approached. You look like your father. Carmen heard that often. But for some reason, hearing it from Evelyn felt different. More personal. The two women entered the station together. A few minutes later they sat inside Roberto's office. Neither spoke immediately. Sometimes older people understand the value of silence. Eventually Evelyn looked around the room. He loved this place. Carmen nodded. I think he loved it more than we realized. Evelyn smiled sadly. Most people thought Estrella was a gas station. It wasn't. The answer came so quickly that Carmen leaned forward. What was it? Evelyn folded her hands. It was a hub. A hub for what? Relationships. That wasn't the answer Carmen expected. Not even close. Evelyn continued. For 40 years, your father helped people. Small business owners. Truckers. Property managers. Farmers. Families. He connected people. He financed projects. He solved problems. He invested quietly. As Evelyn spoke, Carmen slowly began to understand. The network wasn't built on secrecy. It was built on trust. Years of trust. Years of relationships. Years of favors. Years of helping others. The most valuable things in life are often invisible. A good reputation. A trusted name. A promise kept. Those things don't appear on balance sheets. Yet they can be worth more than money. Evelyn eventually pulled a folder from her bag. Then placed it on the desk. This belonged to Roberto. Carmen opened it. Inside were property maps. Partnership agreements. Business summaries. And valuation reports. Her eyes widened. The 6 properties mentioned in Roberto's letter weren't ordinary investments. A warehouse distribution center. A trucking terminal. 3 commercial buildings. And a large parcel of industrial land outside the county. Together they were worth millions. Far more than Carmen expected. Far more. Her hands trembled slightly. Not because of greed. Because of responsibility. This wasn't a lottery ticket. This was her father's life's work. Years of effort. Years of sacrifice. Years of careful decisions. Then Evelyn pointed to one of the reports. A recent appraisal. Carmen immediately noticed something strange. The date. Only 3 weeks old. 3 weeks before Roberto died. He knew, Carmen whispered. Evelyn nodded. Yes. He knew his health was failing. The room became quiet. Very quiet. Then Carmen noticed another document. A purchase offer. An aggressive purchase offer. Submitted 6 months earlier. The buyer's name had been hidden behind a corporate entity. But several signatures remained visible. One signature stopped Carmen cold. Marcus Rodriguez. For several seconds she couldn't breathe. The offer wasn't for Estrella. It was for one of the warehouse properties connected to Estrella. Marcus had tried to acquire it. Months before the funeral. Months before the will. Months before Roberto died. The realization hit hard. Marcus hadn't become interested after hearing the inheritance. He had already been interested. Already investigating. Already trying to gain control. And suddenly Roberto's warnings made perfect sense. Evelyn watched her carefully. I was afraid you'd find that. Carmen looked up. When did my father learn about this? The older woman sighed. Almost a year ago. A year. A full year. That meant Roberto spent the final year of his life knowing something was wrong. Knowing one of his children was pursuing assets connected to the network. Knowing trust inside the family was already breaking apart. The thought hurt. More than Carmen expected. Then Evelyn said something that changed everything. Marcus wasn't acting alone. Carmen stared at her. What do you mean? Evelyn's expression darkened. For the first time, genuine concern appeared on her face. There are other people involved. People with much bigger interests than your brother. And now they know Roberto is gone. The office suddenly felt colder. Outside, the afternoon sun still shined through the dusty windows. But inside Estrella, Carmen felt something she hadn't felt before. Not curiosity. Not confusion. Danger. Because whatever her father had spent decades protecting, someone else was now trying to find it too. Carmen didn't tell Marcus about Evelyn. She didn't tell Victoria either. For the first time since her father's funeral, she stopped answering every phone call immediately. Stopped explaining where she was. Stopped volunteering information. Not because she wanted to lie. Because she had finally realized something. Not everyone asking questions deserved answers. That evening, she drove home in silence. The setting sun painted long shadows across the road. Normally she would have used the drive to think about work. Bills. Groceries. The girls' school activities. Now her mind kept returning to the same thought. Marcus knew. Maybe not everything. But enough. Enough to start searching before their father died. Enough to try acquiring one of the connected properties. Enough to visit Estrella in secret. The realization hurt. Not because it was shocking. Because it was her brother. People often imagine betrayal arrives from enemies. Most of the time, it arrives from people we love. That is why it hurts so much. When Carmen arrived home, she found Luna sitting at the kitchen table. A science project was spread across half the room. Construction paper. Markers. Glue sticks. Chaos. The usual. "Mom," Luna announced. "I need poster board." "When?" "Tomorrow." Carmen laughed. "Of course you do." Mia looked up from the couch. "I told her yesterday." "You did not." "I absolutely did." The argument continued for several minutes. Normal. Ordinary. Beautiful. For a little while, Carmen forgot about hidden archives and property records. Forgot about Marcus. Forgot about Evelyn's warning. Life has a way of demanding your attention. Even when you're carrying secrets. Especially then. Later that night, after the girls went upstairs, Carmen opened one of the flash drives from Roberto's case. Her old laptop struggled for nearly a minute before loading the files. Hundreds of documents appeared. Partnership agreements. Financial records. Property reports. Photographs. Then one folder caught her eye. Personal. The folder contained dozens of audio recordings. Most were labeled by date. Some stretched back nearly 15 years. Carmen clicked the oldest one. Static filled the speakers. Then Roberto's voice appeared. Younger. Stronger. Alive. Carmen immediately froze. Grief has a strange relationship with sound. Sometimes you can go months without crying. Then hear a familiar voice. And suddenly you're standing in the middle of every memory at once. Roberto spoke calmly. "If you're listening to this, then something happened sooner than I hoped. I started making these recordings because memories fade. Facts don't. People forget conversations. Documents survive." The recording continued for nearly 20 minutes. Most of it involved business matters. Property acquisitions. Partnership discussions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. Until the final 2 minutes. Marcus came by today. Again. He asked questions about the warehouse portfolio. Questions he shouldn't know to ask. Someone is feeding him information. I don't know who. Not yet. But I intend to find out. The recording ended. Carmen sat motionless. Someone is feeding him information. The sentence echoed in her mind. Not Marcus acting alone. Exactly what Evelyn had warned. She opened another recording. Then another. Then another. The pattern repeated. Over several years, Roberto documented concerns. Questions. Odd conversations. Unexpected business inquiries. Each one pointed toward the same conclusion. Someone had been slowly gathering information about the network. Someone patient. Someone careful. The kind of person who understood the value of staying invisible. A knock at the door startled her. Hard. Unexpected. 3 quick knocks. Then silence. Carmen checked the clock. 9:47 p.m. Nobody visited at that hour. Especially not without calling first. Another knock followed. Her pulse quickened. The girls were upstairs. The house suddenly felt much smaller. Slowly she walked toward the front window. Careful not to be seen. Outside stood a man she didn't recognize. Mid-50s. Baseball cap. Dark jacket. Holding a large envelope. Nothing threatening. Nothing obvious. Yet something felt wrong. Very wrong. The man looked directly toward the house. As though he knew she was watching. Then he placed the envelope on the porch. Turned around. And left. No explanation. No note. Nothing. Carmen waited until his vehicle disappeared. Then opened the front door. The envelope felt heavy. Inside she found photographs. Dozens of them. Photographs of Estrella. The warehouse properties. Several commercial buildings. Even the underground station entrance. Her stomach dropped. Someone had been watching. Not recently. 4 months. Some photographs were clearly dated. 8 months ago. 6 months ago. 3 months ago. The surveillance started long before Roberto died. At the bottom sat a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. No name. Just one sentence. Your father knew what was coming. That was all. Nothing more. Carmen read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Your father knew what was coming. Not. Your father suspected. Not. Your father worried. Knew. The wording mattered. Words always matter. For nearly an hour she sat at the kitchen table examining every photograph. One image eventually caught her attention. A warehouse loading dock. Ordinary at first glance. Then she noticed 2 people standing near the edge of the frame. One was Marcus. The other was unfamiliar. A tall man wearing a gray suit. The image had been taken 7 months earlier. Before the funeral. Before the illness became severe. Before anyone knew Roberto was dying. Carmen stared at the stranger. Something about him felt important. She couldn't explain why. Only that her instincts wouldn't let it go. Trust yourself. More than you think you should. Her father's words returned once again. Then she noticed something she had missed. A logo on the stranger's briefcase. Small. Barely visible. 3 silver stars arranged in a triangle. Carmen's heart skipped. 3 stars. The same symbol that appeared throughout Estrella. The same symbol hidden in Roberto's clues. The same symbol connected to everything. Whoever that man was. He wasn't outside the mystery. He was inside it. And somehow, Marcus had been meeting with him months before their father's death. Carmen barely slept that night. The photographs remained spread across the kitchen table long after midnight. Every image seemed to tell part of a story. A story nobody had wanted her to see. The picture of Marcus standing beside the stranger bothered her most. Not because they were meeting. Because of how comfortable they looked. There was no tension. No surprise. No negotiation. They looked familiar with one another. As if the relationship had existed for a long time. That realization sat heavily in her chest. Family secrets are painful. But discovering that a secret has been unfolding for years without your knowledge is something else entirely. It makes you question every conversation that came before. Every explanation. Every smile. Every promise. The next morning, Carmen arrived at Estrella before sunrise. She wanted time alone. Time to think. Time to search. The station was quiet. The highway traffic hadn't started yet. The sky was still painted in shades of gray and blue. For a moment, she stood beside the old gas pumps and remembered coming here with Roberto. Back then she thought he spent his days selling fuel, fixing machines, paying bills, living an ordinary life. The older she became, the more she realized how little children truly know about their parents. Not because parents lie. Because some stories take a lifetime to understand. Inside the office, Carmen returned to the underground archive. This time she brought the photograph. The one showing Marcus and the man carrying the briefcase with the 3-star symbol. She spread everything across the table. Property maps. Financial reports. Business agreements. Letters. Photographs. Hours passed. At first, nothing connected. Then she noticed something. The same 3-star symbol appeared repeatedly throughout Roberto's records. Not prominently. Never on official documents. Always hidden. A small mark beside certain properties. A notation beside specific partnerships. A symbol drawn next to names Roberto trusted. The stars weren't a company logo. They were a designation. A category. A code. The discovery sent a chill through her. Because it meant the stranger wasn't an outsider. He was connected to Roberto's network. Connected somehow to everything her father built. Carmen pulled one file after another. Eventually she found a handwritten note from nearly 12 years earlier. The paper had yellowed with age. Several names appeared on the list. One of them matched the name printed beneath an old photograph. Thomas Grayson. Carmen froze. The man in the photograph. The stranger standing beside Marcus. Thomas Grayson. For the first time, she had a name. She searched through additional records. It didn't take long before another pattern emerged. Thomas Grayson appeared everywhere. Warehouse transactions. Land purchases. Investment partnerships. Consulting agreements. Not as an owner. Not as a manager. Always as an advisor. A facilitator. Someone working quietly in the background. Exactly the kind of person most people overlook. Exactly the kind of person Roberto would pay attention to. Then Carmen found something unexpected. A personal note written entirely by hand. Not from Roberto. From Thomas. Roberto. There are people asking questions again. I believe they're getting closer. Be careful who you trust. Especially family. That final sentence made Carmen stop breathing. Especially family. The note had been written nearly 3 years ago. 3 years. Long before Roberto's illness. Long before the will. Long before the funeral. This problem had existed for much longer than anyone realized. Suddenly another memory surfaced. Evelyn's warning. Marcus wasn't acting alone. The words now felt far more serious. At noon, Carmen's phone rang. Victoria. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Instead she answered. Hi. Carmen. Victoria sounded unusually warm. I was thinking about you. Carmen almost laughed. The timing felt too perfect. Too convenient. That's nice. A pause followed. Then Victoria continued. I know things have been difficult. After Dad. After everything. The concern sounded genuine. At least partly genuine. That was the difficult thing. Victoria wasn't a monster. Neither was Marcus. That would make everything easier. Life is rarely that simple. People can love their families and still make terrible choices. People can care about others and still betray them. The two things often exist together. Carmen, Victoria said carefully. Have you visited Estrella yet? There it was. The real reason for the call. Not grief. Not concern. Estrella. Always Estrella. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason. The answer arrived too quickly. Far too quickly. Victoria continued. I was just curious. Another silence stretched between them. Then Victoria said something unexpected. Marcus is making a mistake. Carmen frowned. What do you mean? Her sister sighed. For the first time, she sounded tired. Genuinely tired. I think he's in over his head. The word surprised Carmen. Because they didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded honest. Maybe honesty and deception were becoming tangled together. Maybe they always had been. Before Carmen could ask another question, Victoria spoke again. Just be careful. Then she ended the call. No explanation. No details. Nothing. Carmen stared at the phone. Confused. Disturbed. Curious. The conversation felt incomplete. Like a warning someone wasn't ready to fully give. Late that afternoon, Carmen returned to the documents. Near the bottom of a storage box, she discovered one final file. Marked private. The contents were thin. Only a handful of pages. But the first page immediately caught her attention. It was a background investigation. Conducted by Roberto. On Thomas Grayson. Carmen quickly flipped through the report. Her pulse quickened with every page. Because according to the investigation, Thomas Grayson wasn't simply a business advisor. He wasn't simply a consultant. And he certainly wasn't a trusted partner. For nearly 15 years, Roberto had quietly suspected that Thomas was attempting to gain control of key properties connected to the network. Slowly. Patiently. Strategically. One piece at a time. And according to the final page, Thomas had recently shifted his attention towards someone new. Marcus Rodriguez. Carmen lowered the report. Everything suddenly aligned. The warehouse offers. The secret meetings. The pressure to sell. The search inside Estrella. Marcus hadn't started the fire. He had been drawn into it. Used. Manipulated. Maybe willingly. Maybe not. But now the danger surrounding Estrella wasn't just about family anymore. Because somewhere beyond the station, beyond the properties, beyond the inheritance, someone else was already making their move. For the first time since discovering the underground archive, Carmen stopped looking for answers. Instead, she started looking for motives. Because facts alone weren't enough anymore. She knew Marcus had met with Thomas Grayson. She knew Roberto had been concerned for years. She knew people were watching Estrella long before the funeral. The real question was why? Why now? Why after decades? Why had everything accelerated during Roberto's final year? The answer came from a place she least expected. 3 days later. At Mia and Luna's middle school. Life has a strange sense of timing. Just when you think you're dealing with something enormous, it reminds you that ordinary responsibilities never disappear. Carmen had been called in for a parent-teacher meeting. Nothing serious. At least not according to the email. Luna had challenged a teacher. Again. Mia had stepped in to defend her sister. Again. The twins sat outside the office looking equally annoyed. Carmen almost smiled. Some things never changed. After the meeting ended, she walked the girls toward the parking lot. That was when her phone vibrated. Evelyn. Carmen. The older woman's voice sounded tense. Different than before. What happened? We need to meet. When? Now. The answer came instantly. Carmen's stomach tightened. 40 minutes later, they sat together inside a small diner nearly 30 miles outside town. Not Estrella. Not anywhere connected to Roberto. Evelyn had insisted. That alone worried Carmen. The older woman slid a manila folder across the table. I found something in Roberto's storage records. Carmen opened it. Inside sat copies of old correspondence, property agreements, financial summaries. Most dated back more than a decade. Then she noticed one particular document. A partnership proposal. Rejected. The signature at the bottom belonged to Thomas Grayson. The date was 14 years old. 14 years. Long before Marcus. Long before the recent problems. Long before anyone suspected trouble. What is this? Carmen asked. Evelyn leaned back. The beginning. Carmen frowned. The beginning of what? The day Thomas realized Roberto would never give him control. The diner suddenly felt quieter. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, Evelyn slowly explained. Years earlier, Thomas had approached Roberto with an ambitious proposal. A massive consolidation project. Warehouses. Transportation routes. Commercial properties. Everything combined under centralized management. On paper, it looked profitable. Very profitable. Most people would have accepted. Roberto didn't. Why? Carmen asked. Evelyn smiled sadly. Because your father trusted people more than systems. The answer sounded exactly like Roberto. Evelyn continued. Thomas saw assets. Roberto saw relationships. Those are very different things. The more Carmen listened, the more she understood. The network wasn't valuable because of buildings. Or land. Or money. It was valuable because hundreds of people depended on it. Small businesses. Independent operators. Families. People Roberto had helped for decades. If Thomas gained control, everything would become numbers on a spreadsheet. Nothing more. The realization changed everything. This was never about a hidden fortune. It was about ownership. Control. Influence. The ability to decide what happened next. Evelyn lowered her voice. When Roberto refused, Thomas started looking for another path. Carmen already knew the answer. Marcus. Evelyn nodded. Eventually. Then she surprised her. But not first. Carmen looked up. What do you mean? The older woman opened another folder. Inside sat several photographs. One immediately caught Carmen's attention. Victoria. 10 years younger. Standing beside Thomas at a business conference. The date nearly made Carmen drop the picture. 11 years ago. Not Marcus. Victoria. For a moment, Carmen couldn't speak. Everything she thought she understood shifted. Victoria had known Thomas first. Years before Marcus. Years before the warehouse offers. Years before Estrella. The discovery hurt in a completely different way. Not because Victoria was involved. Because she suddenly remembered something. The phone call. Be careful. Marcus is making a mistake. At the time, Carmen thought Victoria was warning her. Now she wondered if Victoria had been warning herself. People carry regret in different ways. Some hide it. Some deny it. Some spend years trying to fix mistakes nobody else even knows exist. Maybe Victoria belonged to the third group. Maybe not. The truth still wasn't clear. That evening, Carmen drove directly to Estrella. The rain continued. Heavy now. The station looked lonely beneath the gray sky. Inside the archive, she searched through additional records connected to Victoria. Hours passed. Then she found it. A letter. Never mailed. Never sent. Written entirely in Victoria's handwriting. Dad. I know you think I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am. But I'm tired of always being treated like I need protecting. I'm tired of being compared to Marcus. And tired of feeling invisible. Thomas believes in my ideas. He listens. Even when you don't. The letter continued for several pages. By the end, Carmen felt something unexpected. Not anger. Sadness. Because beneath every sentence, she saw something familiar. A daughter trying desperately to earn approval. A daughter who felt overlooked. A daughter making increasingly poor choices while convincing herself they were necessary. The tragedy wasn't that Victoria hated Roberto. The tragedy was that she wanted his respect so badly. And never believed she had it. Carmen sat quietly for a long time. Looking at the letter. Thinking about her family. Thinking about her father. Thinking about all the conversations that never happened. Family wounds rarely begin where people think they do. Most begin years earlier. In moments nobody recognizes as important. Then they grow. Slowly. Quietly. Until one day they become impossible to ignore. As Carmen carefully returned the letter to its folder, her phone suddenly buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. Only 7 words appeared on the screen. Your brother knows about the archive now. For several seconds, Carmen stared at the message. Then another arrived. This one even shorter. He's coming tonight. And for the first time since Roberto's death, Carmen realized she might have to confront Marcus directly. Carmen arrived at Estrella just after sunset. The rain had stopped. The highway was quiet. The old station sat beneath the fading light exactly as it had for decades. Ordinary. Forgettable. Easy to overlook. Her father had built an entire life around that idea. People rarely pay attention to what appears ordinary. Tonight, however, nothing felt ordinary. The text message echoed in her mind. He's coming tonight. For the first time, Carmen wasn't afraid of what she might discover. She was afraid of what she already knew. Inside the office, she unlocked the hidden archive one final time. The boxes. The letters. The photographs. The journals. Everything Roberto had spent 40 years protecting remained exactly where he left it. She walked slowly through the room. Running her fingers across shelves and storage cases. This wasn't a treasure vault. It never had been. It was a record of a life. A record of promises kept. Relationships built. People helped. Mistakes survived. Dreams preserved. In the end, that was Roberto's real inheritance. Not money. Not property. Trust. A sound upstairs interrupted her thoughts. The front door. Someone had entered. Carmen climbed the staircase slowly. When she reached the office, Marcus was standing near the desk. Alone. For a moment neither sibling spoke. Years of history filled the silence between them. Marcus looked exhausted. Not angry. Not confident. Just tired. Very tired. Finally he spoke. You found it. Carmen nodded. I did. Marcus lowered his eyes. I always wondered. The honesty surprised her. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't performing. Wasn't selling. Wasn't persuading. He simply sounded defeated. Carmen pulled out a chair. Sit down. After a moment, he did. The silence returned. Sometimes the hardest conversations begin that way. Not with shouting. Not with accusations. With silence. Marcus stared at the floor. Then finally said the thing Carmen never expected to hear. I never meant for it to get this far. Those words carried more truth than any excuse. Because nobody plans to lose themselves. People simply make one compromise. Then another. Then another. Until one day they barely recognize themselves. Marcus rubbed his face. Thomas approached me years ago. Carmen listened. He knew about the warehouses. He knew about the transportation contracts. He knew Dad was holding everything together. Marcus laughed bitterly. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. The confession hung in the air. Painful. Honest. I thought I could control the situation. But eventually. He stopped speaking. Eventually. The word said everything. Eventually he became dependent. Eventually he needed deals to succeed. Eventually he stopped asking whether something was right and only asked whether it was profitable. Eventually he got trapped. Marcus looked up. His eyes were wet. I disappointed him. Carmen didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was more complicated. Roberto had been disappointed. But disappointment wasn't the same thing as a lack of love. Many people spend their lives confusing those two things. Finally she said quietly. He never stopped loving you. Marcus closed his eyes. For a moment he looked like a little boy instead of a businessman. Then he nodded. As if he already knew. As if hearing it simply hurt. The office door opened again. Both siblings turned. Victoria stepped inside. She looked almost as exhausted as Marcus. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Victoria laughed softly. A sad laugh. Well. I guess we're all here. The three siblings sat together for the first time in years. Not as competitors. Not as business people. Not as people fighting over an inheritance. As children. Children who had lost their father. Children who had spent too many years misunderstanding each other. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. Longer than any of them expected. There were apologies. Some accepted. Some unfinished. There were explanations. Regrets. Painful truths. And finally. Acceptance. Victoria admitted she introduced Thomas to Marcus years earlier. At the time she believed he was helping. Offering opportunities. Opening doors. She hadn't realized what those opportunities would become. Marcus admitted he ignored warning signs because success felt too important to abandon. Neither excuse erased the damage. But understanding finally replaced mystery. Sometimes closure isn't about winning. It's about understanding. Near midnight, Carmen brought out Roberto's unfinished letter. The one addressed to all 3 children. The one with missing pages. Marcus stared at it. Then quietly reached into his jacket pocket. And placed several folded sheets on the desk. The missing pages. Carmen looked at him. Marcus nodded. I took them. Years earlier. During one of his secret searches. He had convinced himself Roberto was hiding something valuable. Something unfairly withheld. Instead, he found a letter. A letter he was too ashamed to return. Slowly Carmen unfolded the remaining pages. Together, the 3 siblings read the final words their father had written. If you're reading this together, then perhaps my greatest hope survived. You were never meant to compete with each other. You were meant to protect each other. Everything I built can disappear tomorrow. Buildings can be sold. Money can be spent. Businesses can fail. But if you still have family, you still have something worth fighting for. Please don't wait as long as I did to understand that. Love. Dad. Nobody spoke for a long time afterward. Nobody needed to. 6 months later, Estrella looked different. The station had been renovated. The old sign restored. The office repaired. But Carmen kept one thing exactly the same. The coffee machine. The broken coffee machine that hid the entrance to the archive. Visitors often asked why she never replaced it. She always smiled. Then changed the subject. Some memories aren't meant to be explained. Only protected. The property network remained intact. Managed responsibly. The people who depended on it continued to work. Continued to build businesses. Continued to support their families. Exactly as Roberto intended. Marcus stepped away from several partnerships. Victoria rebuilt parts of her business with complete transparency. Neither transformation happened overnight. Real change rarely does. And Carmen? She continued working less than before. But not because she became wealthy. Because she finally understood something her father had spent years trying to teach. Security isn't having more than you need. It's knowing what matters enough to protect. One evening, nearly a year after Roberto's death, Carmen sat outside Estrella watching the sunset. Mia and Luna laughed nearby, arguing over something completely unimportant. The way sisters always do. The same warm breeze moved across the property. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then Carmen looked toward the old station sign. Estrella. Star. She smiled. Because she finally understood why Roberto chose that name. Stars don't tell people where to go. They simply help them find their way. And after everything that had happened, that was exactly what her father had left behind. Not a fortune. A direction. And for the first time in a very long time, the Rodriguez family was finally moving toward it together.